Hey guys, tonight we're dusting off our silk handkerchiefs and plunging headfirst into the world of French aristocrats right before the Revolution, a time so glamorous and revolting that even your weirdest family holiday dinner has nothing on it. We're talking powdered wigs, sour cheese breath, and enough body odor to clear out Versailles faster than a fire drill. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, put on a fan for that authentic drafty chateau effect, and get comfortable. If you have a scented candle, light it. Just pray it's not Eau de 18th century France. Let's play a quick game. Have you ever wondered what the most privileged people in history did with their days? Did French aristocrats ever wash? How many servants does it take to dress a duke? What's it like to use a gilded chamber pot? And whose job was it to clean that thing? Could you stomach a meal in a dining room that doubled as a livestock pen? Did anyone in Versailles actually know what a toothbrush was? And more importantly, would you survive a single day without modern plumbing, privacy, or the concept of a non-lethal perfume? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1788, in a bed that smells suspiciously like cheese, surrounded by more powdered hair than a Halloween wig shop. Good luck, you're officially a French aristocrat on the eve of everything going spectacularly wrong. Morning begins not with birdsong, but the squawk of a footman shaking out your mattress, because yes, it's stuffed with feathers, dust, and the collective hopes and dreams of an entire generation of lice. The sunlight pours through floor-length drapes, illuminating the delicate cloud of dander hovering over your face. You stretch, realizing your nightshirt is basically a petri dish. Welcome to another glorious, itchy day. You'd think, as an aristocrat, that you'd get to sleep in. Wrong, you don't sleep in. You awaken to the world, which really means jolting upright as three servants drag your covers off and begin debating whether last night's wine stain is more Bordeaux or just despair. The mattress itself is a work of historical horror. Underneath layers of silk and brocade lies a sack stuffed with feathers, down, and a generous helping of bugs, each one an original inhabitant since the reign of Louis XIV. If you're lucky, the bedbugs only nibbled your ankles. If you're unlucky, they threw a party and invited the fleas. Your pillow is a paradox. It looks cloud-like, embroidered with golden thread, but feels like a lumpy sack filled with duck parts and crushed dreams. As you turn your head, a little flurry of powder and old perfume poofs into the air, a gentle reminder that hygiene is for people without land holdings. The sheets, allegedly changed every week, have achieved a sort of vintage aroma, a complex bouquet somewhere between goat cheese, old roses, and mild panic. In winter, the sheets are so cold they could pass for fresh-caught trout. In summer, they cling to you like a judgmental aunt. Now let's talk about your pajamas. A linen nightshirt that at first glance looks fresh and white, but on closer inspection could be a map of the previous evening's anxieties. Linen breathes, but not well enough to stop you from waking up slightly moist, slightly sticky, and, if you've got aristocratic luck, crawling with one or two tiny stowaways. You try to ignore the crawling sensation on your leg. Is it a loose thread? Or is it Henriette, the flea who's been with you since childhood? You'll never know. Of course, you're not alone in bed. The best part of being a French aristocrat is the sense of togetherness. And by togetherness, I mean you, the lice, the fleas, and occasionally a decorative spaniel whose only talent is drooling directly onto your pillow. Privacy is not a thing. While you're rubbing your eyes and scratching your arms, a footman stands politely in the corner, waiting for the signal to help you stand up. A process that involves more choreography than a ballet. He's followed by the maid, who has brought your morning chocolate and a little brush for your wig, which she assumes you slept in. You didn't, but it's best not to correct her. You heave yourself up, your joints creaking like an old wine barrel. and immediately step onto a floor so cold and gritty it makes you long for the soft warmth of the mattress, parasites and all. There's a pair of slippers waiting by your bed. They look regal, but they're lined with the same mysterious fluff as the mattress, and are almost certainly home to their own thriving colony of living things. You slide your feet in, wincing as you feel something squish. It's fine, you're building character. While you try to regain your dignity, the window is thrown open to air out the chamber. This is code for let in the fresh Parisian breeze, mixed with the subtle undertones of chamber pots being emptied across the courtyard. Sunlight streams in, dust motes swirling like the ghosts of hygiene past. And so you begin your day. Slightly filthy, definitely itchy, and with an unshakable suspicion that no matter how rich you are, you will never, ever know what it's like to wake up truly alone in your own bed. Welcome to the aristocracy. Sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs organize. The first thing that hits you isn't the aroma of fresh pastry. It's the smell of your own mouth. Toothpaste hasn't been invented, and the closest thing you've got to mouthwash is a swish of last night's wine. Breakfast in bed? More like breakfast with bedbugs. Bon appetit. Your tongue feels like it's been replaced overnight by a piece of old felt. You try to swallow, but your mouth is drier than the Marquis de Sade's sense of humor. You gingerly poke at your teeth with a silver pick, a tool that's as much about social signaling as it is about hygiene. If anyone walks in, you want them to see that you at least thought about oral health, even if the results are mixed. Let's face it, your mouth has seen things. Your breath could strip the paint off Versailles. And you're not alone, everyone in the chateau is suffering from the same affliction. If you're particularly unlucky, your gums might be bleeding slightly from that unfortunate run-in with last night's tough boar stew. If you're lucky, you'll find a crumb or two of yesterday's pastry and start your day with a little bonus fiber. You reach for your morning beverage, a steaming cup of something that calls itself coffee. In 1788, coffee is all the rage, the newest import for the upper crust, and the only thing strong enough to temporarily distract you from the fact that your mouth smells like a cheese market in July. Of course, the coffee comes with a side of drama. It's prepared by a servant who looks nervous, because the penalty for getting your coffee wrong is being glared at by a countess. This is a fate worse than death. As you take your first sip, you're struck by the glorious bitterness. Coffee, at this point in history, is strong enough to dissolve the family silver if left unattended. It's served in delicate porcelain, which you balance on your lap with the grace of someone who has never poured a drink for themselves. You try to appear composed, but you're quietly wondering if anyone else can hear your stomach rumbling above the sound of your own jaw creaking. And then there's the food. The aristocratic breakfast spread is legendary. At least, that's what you'll write in your next letter to your cousin in Vienna. In reality, you're presented with an intimidating mountain of bread, some fresh, some stale, and all likely to contain at least one surprise ingredient. Croissants are the height of luxury, flaky and buttery, and, if you're honest, a little bit suspect. If you break one open and a beetle crawls out, it's just protein. That's what you tell yourself. Your servants bring in a tray of jam and honey, both oozing across the tablecloth because lids are apparently for peasants. There's cheese, so much cheese, in varying shades of beige and blue, perfuming the room with an intensity that makes you wonder if it's the cheese or your own breath causing your eyes to water. Some mornings there's fruit, grapes so old they've started fermenting, or an apple that doubles as a chew toy. All this is delivered by a series of yawning footmen and maids who are silently judging your table manners. You, meanwhile, are locked in an internal battle. Do you risk a smile and show your crumbling teeth? Or keep your lips sealed and hope nobody notices the cloud of doom wafting from your mouth? Modern mouthwash commercials have nothing on the average breakfast conversation at Versailles. Imagine every person at the table carefully covering their mouth with a lace napkin talking in hushed, mumbly tones and subtly leaning away from one another. It's like a secret society dedicated to denying the existence of halitosis. Every so often, you catch the eye of another noble and share a silent look. We're all suffering, aren't we? And you are. Because beneath all the sugar, bread, and bravado, everyone knows that breakfast is just a polite waiting game before the next bout of indigestion. As you sip your coffee, chew your slightly suspicious croissant, and try not to breathe too deeply, you realize that being an aristocrat means never letting them see you sweat or burp, or God forbid yawn. Bon appetit indeed. Welcome to the most luxurious misery a morning can offer. Bathing, in theory, is a noble pursuit. In practice, it's a once-in-a-while, lukewarm ordeal involving rose water, 2 gallons of perfume, and at least 4 servants. You're not clean, but you're damp, and somehow you now smell both floral and faintly like goat cheese. Let's set the scene. It's the late 1700s, and you, as a French aristocrat, are about to embark on the single most over-engineered 10 minutes of your week. The courtly wash. The process begins with your maid cautiously suggesting it might be time for une petite toilette, which is code for we've noticed you've started attracting bees indoors again. You pretend to consider, but the truth is, you haven't had a full bath since Easter, and it's currently August. Your first stop is the dressing room, a place that smells permanently of wilted flowers and ambition. In comes the washing crew, 2 maids, 1 footman, and the lady's companion, who is there purely to observe and gossip about your moles. Someone hauls in a copper tub that looks like it was designed by a committee of people who've never seen water. It's placed right in the middle of your parquet floor, with no concern for splashes or dignity. Now comes the water. Forget hot and cold taps. The water is tepid at best, boiled in the kitchens 3 flights below, lugged up in sloshing buckets by servants whose resentment is as visible as their sweat. By the time it reaches you, it's just above room temperature, which in an 18th century French palace means refreshingly brisk or, oh dear, I can't feel my toes. Into the tub you go, wearing your bathing shift, a kind of linen nightgown designed to preserve modesty while rendering the actual act of washing basically impossible. 1 maid dabs at your forehead with a damp cloth, another gently splashes rosewater on your shoulders, and the third stands ready with a soft sponge. Soft, of course, meaning crumbling and slightly suspicious. You sigh and settle in, doing your best impression of a sunken soufflé. Soap is present, but only in cameo appearances. Real soap, anything with actual cleaning power, is reserved for emergencies, like visits from royalty or outbreaks of visible fungus. For most washes, you're slathered with toilette vinegar, a blend of alcohol, herbs, and enough perfume to sanitize a small barn. The goal isn't so much cleanliness as it is plausible deniability. If you smell like something other than yourself, you are, by the standards of the day, clean. The entire ritual is set to a soundtrack of polite coughing, awkwardly staged small talk, and the faint sound of your neighbor across the courtyard complaining about the draft. Occasionally, your lady's companion will suggest a new scent or sprinkle dried lavender on your head for freshness. The end result is less just stepped out of a spa and more fell into a florist's dumpster behind a cheese shop. When the wash is finished, you're carefully toweled off by your team, who are trying very hard not to make eye contact with the unfortunate rash on your left ankle. Your hair is dusted with scented powder, both to absorb lingering grease and to give the illusion of health. Nobody is fooled. The final step, a liberal application of perfume, dabbed behind each ear, under your arms, and in any other crevice deemed socially hazardous. The room now smells like a duel between a rose garden and a dairy. Of course, there are rumors that some people, Englishmen mostly, actually bathe in water, fully submerged, more than once a month. You laugh politely at the idea, secretly horrified at the thought of anyone seeing your knees that often. You're done. You've survived the ordeal. You may not be clean, but you are presentable. You emerge from the dressing room in a cloud of floral mist and misplaced confidence, ready to face the day, so long as nobody gets too close. And that, my friend, is the noble art of washing in the 18th century. Part performance, part aromatherapy, all denial. Cleanliness is relative. And in your world, it's always just out of reach. Before you face the world, your valet plops a 2-pound powdered wig onto your head, teeming with secrets and, occasionally, actual bugs. The powder is meant to keep the lice at bay. It mostly keeps the lice on their toes. Let's be honest, nothing says I'm important quite like balancing a fake hair helmet on your scalp, especially one that's so big it might qualify as a second residence. In the world of French aristocracy, hair is less about vanity and more about infrastructure. Your wig is a status symbol, a security blanket, and a portable petting zoo, all rolled into one. The process begins with your real hair, if you're lucky enough to have any left, being slicked back with a generous handful of pomade. Pomade, in this era, is a rich paste made from bear fat, beef tallow, and something vaguely floral, which means you start your morning smelling like a cheese plate that's been left out at a picnic. The goal is to flatten your own hair to oblivion so the wig fits naturally, a term used very loosely in 1788. Now, the main event, your wig, which is not just a wig but a statement. Some are tall enough to require ducking under doorways, others are wide enough to seat a small bird, which occasionally happens. Fashion trends change quickly. One year, it's the towering poof. The next, it's the tidy queue. But the unifying factor is always the powder. Clouds of it. The powder is flour or crushed starch, sometimes tinted lavender or blue, sometimes just blindingly white, designed to create the effect of ethereal, almost celestial hair. In practice, it leaves a fine, gritty coating on every surface in your home, your clothing, and your lungs. Powdering is a ritual. Your valet approaches with a large bellows or a duster and applies the powder in heroic bursts, coating not just your wig but half your face and most of the furniture. The goal is twofold. Suffocate the lice and blind anyone who tries to meet your eyes before noon. This process is both preventative and combative. Yes, the powder smothers some bugs, but it mostly just relocates them to new, exciting locations. Occasionally, a live specimen will make a break for it and tumble down your collar. The correct response is to pretend it never happened. Nobility is all about maintaining composure. You may wonder why, not simply wash the wigs. Hilarious. You don't wash a wig. You might send it off to a wig maker once a season to have it boiled, restyled, and deloused for a small fortune. But day to day, you're living with whatever ecosystem has set up shop inside. Most wigs, if pressed, could probably recount more family secrets than your local priest. There's also a social hierarchy in wig wearing. Larger and more elaborate wigs mean higher status, but they're also heavier, itchier, and prone to catastrophic collapse at the first hint of rain. If you see a duke at a party wearing a wig that could shelter a family of raccoons, you're meant to be impressed. If he passes out from heat stroke halfway through the evening, you're meant to pretend not to notice. Ladies' wigs are another level of spectacle. Some are adorned with fake flowers, fruit, entire miniature ships, or little porcelain birds. The more impractical, the better. The only thing bigger than your hair is your sense of self-importance. Getting through a doorway sideways isn't a design flaw, it's a power move. What about the smell? The combination of old powder, stale pomade, sweat, and the occasional decaying decorative apple is best described as historical. You'd think all the perfume in France could mask it, but you'd be wrong. Social gatherings become a battle of aromas, with everyone hoping their own cloud of fragrance will overpower the funk drifting from their neighbor's scalp. Still, your wig serves its purpose, status, style, and plausible deniability for any small movement on your head. You wear it with pride. Head held high. Careful not to sneeze. lest you start a snowstorm of powder across the breakfast table. And that, more than anything, is the true art of aristocratic living, looking magnificent, smelling questionable, and carrying your own private ecosystem wherever you go. Welcome to the powdered life. May your bugs stay hidden and your powder stay dry. You don't just throw on pants and call it a day. Dressing requires a team of highly trained professionals who, by noon, have seen more of your body than your doctor ever will. Lacing, padding, buckling, every layer is a statement. And the main statement is, I've never put on my own socks. Let's begin with the basics. Underwear, if you can call it that. Imagine a loose, billowy linen shirt and a pair of knee-length underbreeches, both of which resemble curtains from a haunted house. If you're a lady, it's even more complicated. Chemise, stays, petticoats, and enough strings and ties to rig a small sailing vessel. Getting dressed is less outfit change and more engineering project. At this point, your valet and maid are already tag-teaming, passing ribbons and muttering under their breath like pit crew at the world's slowest race. Next, the padding. Everyone in your social class aspires to a certain silhouette. Wide hips, impossibly tiny waist, and shoulders strong enough to balance a fruit basket. For men, that means quilted doublets, padded calves, and an alarming number of strategically placed codpieces. For women, it means stiff corsets, whalebone stays, and hoops so wide you can barely fit through your own bedroom door. You aren't just getting dressed. You're being assembled, one restrictive panel at a time. By now, your armpits are beginning to sweat. But don't worry, deodorant is still a fantasy. So you'll just layer on more linen. The next layer is your actual clothing. Breeches and waistcoat for men, gown and overskirt for women. The fabrics are expensive, imported, and, most importantly, unwashed. Silk, brocade, velvet, lace, and anything else that says, I am not here to do manual labor, ever. The sleeves alone take 5 minutes to attach, and you haven't even looked at the buttons yet. Ah, the buttons. Tiny, infuriating, and stitched by someone who clearly hated future generations. Buttoning up your jacket or bodice requires both dexterity and blind faith. That's why you have staff, seamstresses, valets, chambermaids, and at least one person whose only job is to fish lost buttons out of the rug. Some outfits use hooks, others use strings, and if you're particularly unlucky, you might need a little bit of lard to get things sliding smoothly. Now for the outerwear. Frock coats, capes, and, if the weather calls for it, a muff. You look magnificent. You also weigh as much as a sideboard and move about as gracefully. Sitting down is a logistical challenge, requiring advanced planning, 2 footmen, and a basic understanding of physics. For women, the skirt is so wide you have to enter rooms sideways. For men, the jacket tails are so long you could feasibly use them to mop the floor. Which, incidentally, you sometimes do by accident. No look is complete without accessories. Gloves that are so tight you need talcum powder to get them on. Stockings that reach up to your thighs and are held in place with elaborate garters. Jewelry in quantities that would bankrupt a small country. Shoes are dainty, buckled, and universally uncomfortable. If you're lucky, you'll only trip twice before breakfast. And of course, you need help with every step. There's no such thing as privacy. Your staff has seen it all, and they have opinions. Sometimes they offer helpful hints. Monsieur, perhaps today, less powder on the calves? But mostly, they just keep you upright as you wobble toward the mirror. You finally emerge, a walking layer cake of fashion, status, and light perspiration. Every buckle and bow is a declaration of wealth. Every wrinkle a minor scandal. You don't walk so much as glide, forced into elegance by sheer architectural necessity. You may not be able to breathe deeply, sit down, or get undressed without the jaws of life, but at least you look fabulous. And that's the secret of French aristocratic dressing. It's not about comfort or practicality. It's about making sure everyone knows that you have never, ever dressed yourself, and you intend to keep it that way. Why do aristocrats love perfume? Because nothing says I'm rich like dousing yourself in enough musk to make your dog sneeze. The goal isn't to smell nice. It's to survive the day without passing out from the stench of your own armpits. Your day begins and ends with a cloud of fragrance so thick it could qualify for its own property tax. Your dressing table is a miniature apothecary. Tiny glass bottles, corked flasks, and bejeweled atomizers filled with suspiciously colored liquids. There's rose, orange blossom, jasmine, lavender, ambergris, and, if you're feeling daring, a splash of essence of civet harvested directly from the backside of a terrified wildcat. Nothing but the best for your delicate skin. Why so much perfume? It's not just about covering up the fact that you haven't bathed since the last comet sighting. It's about power. A true aristocrat can clear a room, but a great aristocrat can do it by simply walking in and leaving the air shimmering with a scent that whispers, "I don't know how to use soap, but I do know how to spend money." Perfume is the invisible cloak that wraps you up and tells the world, "I have arrived." And so has my overwhelming bouquet. Application is an art form. You don't just dab behind the ears and call it a day. No, you go full Monet on every exposed surface, wrists, neck, elbows, knees, and, for the particularly paranoid, the insides of your shoes. You sprinkle your wig, mist your linen, and occasionally splash a little into the air for good measure. The maids, coughing gently in the background, are a regular part of the ritual. One unlucky servant is assigned the perfume bellows, a device designed to blast fragrance into the very seams of your clothing. If you don't leave a chalk outline of scent everywhere you go, are you really even trying? Your peers are in on the game too. Versailles is a battleground of perfume warfare, with every corridor packed tighter than a muskox in July. Step into a salon, and you're assaulted by a tidal wave of competing fragrances. The Duchess de Brissac's orange water, the Comte's beloved tobacco, rose blend, the Marquise's infamous cinnamon vinegar musk, which has sent more than one houseguest fleeing for the gardens. The air gets so thick you half expect someone to light a candle and set the whole chateau ablaze. But here's the dirty secret. All that fragrance isn't fooling anybody. Underneath it all, the human nose is still catching faint notes of unwashed feet, stale cheese, and the kind of sweat that only happens when you wear 12 layers of clothing and haven't sat down since breakfast. You're not masking the truth. You're just building a barricade of scent and hoping no one is brave enough to scale it. Modern deodorant ads boast about 24-hour protection. 18th century France boasted about making it through the masquerade ball without anyone fainting. Of course, there's status in the source, too. Imported scents cost a fortune. Ambergris from Wales, attar of roses from distant Persia, spices from the Indies. If you can't afford the real deal, you buy locally, which sometimes means floral essence is just pond water with a hint of geranium. This doesn't matter. The most important thing is to reek of something, anything, other than your own humanity. Even the furniture joins in. Cushions and drapes are doused in scented water. Letters are sprinkled with perfume, ensuring that even your mail smells more expensive than most people's houses. You're living in an ecosystem of constant, weaponized fragrance. By the end of the day, your own sense of smell has packed up and left town, and the family dog, once loyal, now glares at you from a safe distance, sneezing into a perfumed paw. Still, you go to bed content, maybe not clean, but unmistakably, overwhelmingly, unmistakably scented. Because in the game of aristocratic survival, it's not the truth that matters. It's how many layers of jasmine and musk you can stack on top of it. Modern plumbing? Not for another. Once 100 years, darling, you squat over a porcelain bowl, hoping the footman waiting outside has earplugs and low expectations. When you're finished, someone else gets the honor of carrying your fragrant offering away. Royalty is all about delegation. The day's first order of business isn't sipping chocolate or petting your lapdog. It's confronting the grim reality that even the most gilded palace is, at heart, just an elaborate public restroom with paintings. You rise from your flea-ridden bed and wobble over to the toilet corner, which is often cordoned off with nothing more than a folding screen and wishful thinking. Behind it, you'll find the noble chamber pot, a beautiful, hand-painted vessel with gold trim, delicate flowers, and, in some cases, your family's crest. It's the most expensive bucket you'll ever sit on. Privacy, of course, is for peasants. Your toilet routine is a social event, or at least a team sport. Maids stand by with clean linen and scented water. The footman, whose entire career is now a testament to human resilience, lurks in the hallway pretending he's somewhere, anywhere else. Sometimes there's even a toilette companion, a close friend or relative whose job is to distract you with the latest scandal while you do what must be done. The French word for this is normal. The modern word for this is trauma. You perch atop the porcelain, acutely aware of the echoing acoustics of 40-foot ceilings. If you're lucky, the chamber pot is cool and clean. If you're not, well, the less said about the last guest, the better. There are no flushes, just a little sprinkle of rose water, if you're fancy, or a hurried prayer that the footman is prompt with his removal service. Heaven forbid you forget to call him, because nothing starts a day like an accidental whiff of yesterday's digestive decisions. Wiping is a choose-your-own adventure. The wealthy have soft cloths, lace-trimmed and monogrammed for posterity, while the merely well-off get rags, or, in a pinch, pages from last season's opera program. If you're truly unfortunate, you might find yourself with a handful of moss or the French luxury of a perfumed sponge on a stick. Toilet paper? Not a twinkle in the inventor's eye. By the time the revolution comes, it'll be the most radical concept in Paris. When your business is concluded, you signal for the footman by bell, by call, or by making awkward eye contact. He enters with the solemn dignity of someone who has seen things and will never be the same. He takes the pot, careful not to spill, and whisks it off to the nearest servant's entrance, where it joins the morning parade of chamber pots on their way to the palace moat, cesspit, or, if you're lucky, an actual sewer. The back corridors echo with the clink of porcelain, the sighs of resignation, and the muffled giggles of less fortunate staff. And yet, for all its indignity, the chamber pot is a status symbol. The bigger and fancier your pot, the more important you are. Some aristocrats even collect them, showing off their elaborate designs like prized china. Ah, yes. This one was a wedding gift from the Duke. Such a generous man, in both spirit and volume. Of course, sometimes things go awry. The pot cracks, a maid stumbles, or, worst of all, the footman is late. There are stories, whispered at dinner, of chamber pot disasters that ended entire careers. You never forget your first spill, and neither does anyone else. By the time you've washed your hands in a splash of lavender water and dabbed a little extra perfume behind your ears, you've survived the most athletic event of the day. You emerge from your private corner, head held high, ready to greet the world. After all, nothing says confidence like surviving the chamber pot Olympics without losing your dignity or your breakfast. Welcome to royal living, where you never lift a finger, but someone else always lifts your pot. The breakfast table is laden with breads, jams, cheese, and the occasional ant colony. You're surrounded by people whose job is to look at you while you eat. Try not to choke on your status, or on the cheese which has been out since yesterday. Let's set the scene. Sunlight floods the hall of mirrors, bouncing off chandeliers and illuminating a table set with enough crystal and porcelain to finance a small war. At each place setting, you'll find a mountain of mismatched pastries, butter gone translucent in the morning heat, and a bowl of fruit that is 60% decorative, 40% slightly fermented, You reach for a croissant, flaky and golden, only to discover it's already been nibbled by something with more legs than you. Nature, as always, finds a way, even in Versailles. The morning meal is a performance, a daily ceremony more about being seen than being fed. There are rules. The king, or whichever noble is currently pretending to be the king of breakfast, sits at the head of the table, surrounded by family, hangers-on, and ambitious guests, all seated in strict hierarchy. Every movement is observed. If you drop a crumb, a flurry of servants will swoop in to remove it before anyone can judge you for lacking the motor skills of a courtier. And someone will still judge you, because that's literally their job. Breakfast is not an intimate family affair. It's public, formal, and populated by a rotating cast of courtiers, most of whom are not there to eat but to eavesdrop, gossip, and watch you try to butter toast without disgracing your lineage. There are the professional flatterers, whose sole purpose is to gasp in awe at the opulence of your jam selection. The old rival from last week's card game, who eyes your bread roll as if it's an act of political aggression. The cousin you haven't spoken to since the infamous wine incident of '85. Even your personal valet stands by with a napkin, ready to dab your chin if you so much as breathe too enthusiastically near the grape jelly. The food itself is a gamble. The breads range from oven-fresh wonders to crusty leftovers that could double as doorstops. Jams and jellies are homemade, but hygiene is theoretical, and you're never quite sure if that poppy seed is just moving. The cheese is legendary, both for its taste and for its ability to evacuate a room. Imagine a camembert so ripe it could answer back. A Roquefort so blue you wonder if it might be plotting an escape. There's milk for your chocolate, but it's been sitting out long enough to develop a distinct personality. If you're lucky, it just curdles. If you're not, it tries to negotiate its freedom. As you nibble, the real feast is the conversation. Politics, scandals, and whispered rumors circulate faster than the butter dish. Who's fallen out of royal favor? Who's having an affair with whose valet? Who was caught smuggling cheese out of the pantry at midnight? Breakfast is Versailles' version of morning news, except everyone at the table is both anchor and headline, and nobody's actually telling the truth. You learn to smile, nod, and laugh at jokes that are, at best, legally actionable. If you're feeling brave, you might try the fruit. Or you might just arrange it artfully on your plate and hope no one notices when you slip it into your pocket for a hungry dog later. And if you're really daring, you'll ask for an egg, soft-boiled, preferably. This request triggers a crisis in the kitchen, a minor diplomatic incident, and at least one servant will have a nervous breakdown before your egg, overcooked and apologetic, finally arrives. The meal ends when the king stands, or when the table collectively loses its will to continue. As you rise, one last look at the breakfast spread reminds you. Status comes with perks, but none of them involve a guaranteed edible meal. You survive somehow, and head out to face the rest of your day. Slightly hungrier, a little more anxious, and already dreading tomorrow's cheese. Congratulations, you've made it through breakfast at Versailles, where the real menu is always gossip, and the main ingredient is fear. You'd think all that wealth would buy a dentist. Instead, you apply rouge, powder your face, and scrape your tongue with a silver spoon. Dental hygiene is mostly a rumor, and everyone's smile looks like they chewed gravel. Let's start with the basics. Hair. If you have any left, it's clinging to your scalp for dear life beneath that daily parade of pomade, powder, and pins. Lice are an accepted part of the ecosystem, treated not as a nuisance but as a feature. You have your lice comb, a thin, cruel little rake of bone or ivory that claims to remove bugs but mostly just redistributes them to new and exciting locations. Combing is done by a maid, who tries to look away as she discovers enough wildlife to populate a small meadow. If you're unlucky, the maid gossips. If you're really unlucky, the lice gossip too. Then comes the face. Rouge is essential. Men and women both apply it in alarming quantities. You dab a crimson circle on each cheek, blending it until you resemble a freshly boiled lobster, a symbol of health, or at least of having functioning capillaries. White face powder follows, layered on with a swan's feather or, if you're low on birds, just your palm. The powder's main ingredient is lead. Yes, lead, because nothing says youthful glow like a gentle daily poisoning. Add a hint of blue vein drawn at the temple for that fragile, artistic, probably consumptive look. Your eyebrows are next. If you're up to date with trends, you've shaved them off entirely and replaced them with mouse fur glued above your eyes. The glue doesn't always hold, so by midday you might be winking at a duke with one eyebrow perched on your forehead and the other dangling by your nose. The real power move is to ignore it. Noblesse oblige, darling. Then there's your breath. Oh, your breath. Your morning began with wine and ends with something best described as historic toothbrushes. If you're lucky, you own a twig to chew on. If you're fashionable, you scrape your tongue with a silver spoon, delicate, expensive, and completely useless. Mouthwash is a splash of spirits, a handful of mint leaves, or just holding your breath and hoping everyone else does the same. You could pay a tooth drawer to yank out an aching molar, but anesthesia hasn't been invented. And the last noble who tried is still rumored to haunt the palace, moaning about nerve pain. Teeth are a status symbol, in the same way that battle scars are. The more you have left, the more you brag. Sugar is fashionable, but only the wealthiest can afford to rot their teeth in style. Blackened stumps and gaping holes peek out from every smile, turning the daily greeting ritual into a sort of oral horror show. Lipstick can only do so much. At court, you learn to purse your lips and let your rouge do the talking, but the show must go on. Nails are buffed, not clipped. Earwax is ignored, unless it's visible, then a servant discreetly gestures and you both pretend nothing happened. Perfumed water is dabbed at the pulse points to disguise the fact that, beneath the flowers, you smell like a wet dog who lost a fight with a cheese wheel. Grooming is a team sport. Valets, maids, hairdressers, and sometimes even a visiting barber-surgeon crowd your dressing room, offering advice, giggling behind their hands, or whispering the latest trend mouse fur brows are out, beet juice lips are in. You smile bravely, revealing the crumbling relics of your dental past, and step into your shoes, powdered, perfumed, and ready to face another day of gossip, glances, and gentle decay. You emerge from your chambers looking like an oil painting in progress. Stunning from a distance, but up close, best viewed through a thick haze of scented powder and dim candlelight. Because when it comes to aristocratic grooming, the goal isn't perfection. It's plausible deniability. And perhaps just a hint of rouge to distract from the rest. The real work of the day is writing letters you'll never send and trading gossip that could get you killed. The salons are alive with rumors and threats, and everyone's trying to be clever without revealing they can't read Latin. You rise from breakfast with a sigh, whether from the cheese, the conversation, or existential fatigue. You're not sure. Now it's time to handle your correspondence. This sounds important, but what it really means is sitting at an ornate desk and commissioning a servant to bring you a tray stacked with paper, quills, and an ink pot the size of your patience. You begin by scanning the pile of invitations and notes, all wax-sealed and perfumed, some dusted with enough powder to leave a white fingerprint on your best silk sleeve. Letter writing is less about communication and more about performance. You pen a response to the Duchesse de la Chanterelle, graciously declining her invitation to a hunting party that you'd rather swallow a cheese rind than attend. You sign your name with a flourish, careful to include the appropriate titles and at least one biblical reference, just in case the priest gets nosy. Most of these letters are destined for the great archival void, lost, ignored, or read only by a bored servant in a drafty hallway. The real fun, of course, is the gossip. Gossip is the currency of Versailles. Gold gets you a carriage, but a juicy secret gets you dinner invitations. You lean over your desk, dictating a note to your trusted scribe. Dearest Jean, Claude, you will not believe who was seen stumbling out of the Marquise's chambers last night. Details to follow. Burn this letter. Of course, Jean-Claude has no intention of burning anything. These notes are the backbone of his retirement plan. The salon circuit kicks off around mid-morning. These aren't your grandma's book clubs. A salon is a high-stakes gladiator match, except the weapons are wit, subtle insults, and the ability to quote Voltaire at just the right moment, or at least pretend you can. You enter a sunlit drawing room, filled with the rustle of silk, the scent of too much perfume, and the buzz of conversation that could start a civil war if it ever made it to print. Everyone is reading, or pretending to. Latin is the prestige language, but let's be honest, half the room is bluffing. You've mastered the art of nodding gravely when someone quotes Cicero, all while silently praying nobody asks you to translate. The other half of the room is eavesdropping, hoping to catch the latest rumor before it goes cold. You swap tidbits like currency. A countess's infidelity for a duke's overdue debts, a cardinal's gout for the latest theatre scandal. Discretion is advised, but rarely practiced. Occasionally, an affair breaks out, by which we mean a passionate whispering in the corner, a coded glance, or a series of urgent notes exchanged under the table. Romance in the aristocracy is less about true love and more about plausible deniability and blackmail insurance. Your spouse, if present, is likely engaged in their own letter-writing campaign to a rival court. Monogamy is a theory, infidelity is sport. And then there's the threat. The shadow of danger that lingers in every bit of gossip and each sealed letter. One wrong word, one ill-timed quip, and you might find yourself on the wrong side of a royal edict, or worse, excluded from next week's masquerade. The consequences are dire: exile, disgrace, or being forced to eat breakfast alone. After a morning of correspondence, scandal, and the occasional nervous giggle, you finally push away from your desk. The pile of letters is larger than when you started. Your mind is abuzz with intrigue, and your only real accomplishment is the satisfaction of knowing that, for one more morning, your secrets are safe and your rivals are just a little bit more nervous. Congratulations! You've survived morning duties in Versailles, where the pen is mightier than the sword, and a loose tongue is the most dangerous weapon of all. You promenade through sculpted gardens, stepping daintily over piles left by the Duke's prized peacocks. The smell is a subtle reminder that all the perfume in the world can't mask nature's revenge. The gardens at Versailles are legendary. Acres of perfectly clipped hedges, mirror-bright ponds, and floral arrangements planned with the sort of detail usually reserved for military campaigns. But the first thing that greets you as you exit the marble halls isn't the fragrance of blooming roses or the gentle hum of bees. It's the unmistakable, eye-watering aroma of animal droppings. Peacocks, swans, and the occasional sheep are the real monarchs here. And today, they've chosen the main promenade for their morning offerings. Draped in velvet and lace, you sweep down the grand stairs, trying to avoid a social faux pas and a messy shoe. It's a delicate dance, gliding gracefully while scanning the ground for potential disasters. Every step is a gamble, one false move, and you'll be the subject of lunchtime gossip for weeks. Did you see the Marquise's shoe? Tragic. She tracked it straight through the orangerie. Of course, it's not just the birds. The flower beds are dazzling, yes, but they're also home to armies of insects with no respect for rank. Butterflies flutter by for atmosphere, but gnats, wasps, and the occasional ambitious beetle target the exposed skin of your elegantly gloved hands. Swatting is strictly forbidden. Instead, you must flinch politely and hope nobody notices the tiny ant making its way up your sleeve. You're not walking alone. The gardens are a theatre, and you're both actor and audience. Other nobles stroll past in formation, comparing tulip bulbs, making snide remarks about whose topiary looks the most depressed, and pretending not to notice when someone steps in something unspeakable. The Queen herself might be spotted, flanked by attendants, issuing opinions on fountains or, more often, on other people's choices in hair accessories. And what a scene the gardens are! Statues of Roman gods, gilded chariots, and fountains that shoot water higher than most peasants' hopes. You pause at a marble bench to admire the view, code for taking a breather and readjusting your shoes, which are now suspiciously sticky. You nod at passing acquaintances, trading compliments that sound sincere but are loaded with the kind of subtext that makes diplomats nervous. Such lovely lilies this year, madame. Almost as radiant as your complexion. How do you do it? Translation: I know about your new face powder. And that thing you said about my cousin, if you're especially unfortunate, a sudden breeze will whip through the trees and send a cloud of pollen, powder, and the ghosts of last night's perfume wafting into your face. You try not to sneeze. Sneezing is undignified, and in Versailles, undignified is just one step away from social ruin. Everywhere you look, there's something calculated. Lovers strolling just out of earshot, rivals exchanging subtle glances, poets pretending to be inspired by the fountains but really just eavesdropping. If you're lucky, you might catch the eye of a sympathetic friend and share a silent, mutual prayer that the peacock ahead moves before you get there. Even the garden staff know their role in the spectacle, trimming hedges with military precision and raking gravel into patterns that last exactly until the next nobleman decides to test the turning radius of his new shoes. The gardeners themselves are invisible, unless of course someone needs to be blamed for the strategically placed pile of peacock revenge currently threatening your afternoon. By the end of your walk, your shoes are a little worse for wear. Your nose is tingling, and your nerves are frayed from dodging both scandal and goose attacks. But you've done it. You've survived another promenade, kept your dignity mostly intact, and provided the world with one more morning of elegant deception. Because at Versailles, the real art of the garden isn't growing flowers. It's making sure nobody sees you slip. Hosting means performing. You nod along as guests boast about their gout, their genealogies, and the new tapestry that allegedly doesn't have fleas. Every smile is a lie, and every handshake is a gamble. Entertaining, in the world of French aristocracy, isn't about fun. It's about survival. A high-stakes sport where your real skill is keeping a straight face through hours of mind-numbing conversation. You don't invite people because you like them. You invite them because you have to, and because they might have something you need, like the ear of a minister, a juicy bit of gossip, or, in a pinch, access to a decent cheese supplier. Your salon, this morning's arena, is an explosion of color and discomfort. Brocade chairs are artfully arranged for maximum visibility and minimum comfort. The fireplace is roaring, even though it's July. Candles burn in gilded holders, filling the air with the scent of expensive wax and slightly burnt hair. A small orchestra squeezes into the corner, tuning their instruments and glancing longingly at the exit. The guests arrive in waves. There's the Comte, who will spend the next hour listing all of his ancestors, none of whom have done anything particularly useful since the Crusades. Madame Laroche launches into a thrilling saga about her new carpet. A carpet so pure, so free of fleas, it's practically a miracle. Everyone pretends to be impressed, even as a moth takes flight from its fringes. In a society where status is everything, even a new rug is political. Small talk is a treacherous river. One wrong turn, and you're mired in a discussion of agricultural tariffs, or, worse, poetry. You perfect your interested face, eyebrows slightly raised, mouth in a neutral smile, nodding rhythmically while your soul quietly leaves your body. It's an Olympic-level display of endurance. Refreshments arrive. Tiny cakes so delicate you could lose them in your wig, and wine so sharp it could strip the polish off your best silver. Every bite is a risk, every sip an invitation for someone to sidle up and launch into their latest medical complaint. Gout is a popular subject. So are kidney stones, mysterious humors, and the persistent itch that absolutely is not lice, thank you very much. Seating arrangements are a political statement. You place your allies close, your rivals just far enough away that any verbal sparring can be easily denied later. Across the room, a pair of cousins are locked in a smile-off, each determined to look happier, healthier, and less scandal-ridden than the other. You, meanwhile, are just trying to keep the conversation from devolving into a shouting match about inheritance law. For entertainment, there's music, amateur theatrics, or, if the night is especially grim, a poetry reading. A nervous young baron is forced to recite a few verses. The crowd murmurs approval while scanning the exits. The musicians launch into a minuet, and guests pair off for a dance. Careful to step on toes, only in the most strategic of ways. A duel in the garden later is not out of the question. And then, of course, there are the games. Cards, dice, or, if someone's feeling reckless, charades. The stakes are always higher than they seem. Lose a hand at cards, and you might lose more than money. You could lose reputation, alliances, or in rare cases your best riding horse. Winning is just as dangerous. Nobody trusts a lucky streak. By the end of the evening, your cheeks hurt from forced smiles, your brain aches from endless small talk, and your ears are ringing from the symphony of humble brags and veiled threats. As the last guest departs, leaving behind only crumbs and the faint smell of disappointment, you collapse onto your moth-eaten tapestry and breathe a sigh of relief, because in the world of French nobility, entertaining isn't about pleasure. It's about making it through the evening without accidentally starting a scandal, or, worse, admitting you were bored. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Curtain up, smile on, and don't let them see you yawn. Your private rooms are a sanctuary, if you ignore the love letters stuffed under the bed and the mountain of dirty linen that no one dares touch. Intimacy, in this world, is a competitive sport. Let's step inside. The boudoir is advertised as a place for relaxation, contemplation, and delicate personal business. In reality, it's the epicenter of emotional chaos. Your chamber is overflowing with velvet cushions, porcelain figurines, wilted bouquets, and piles upon piles of laundry. The linens are stacked so high they could be used for siege defense, and their perfume, somewhere between lavender and existential despair, does little to mask the whiff of 3-day-old socks. At first glance, your bed is a scene of luxury. Brocade canopies, embroidered silk sheets, and more pillows than you have friends. But look a little closer, and you'll spot the evidence of last night's social maneuvering. Notes scribbled on scented paper, love tokens wrapped in lace, and, if you're unlucky, an incriminating silk stocking that is definitely not yours. The average boudoir contains enough secrets to spark a dozen duels before lunch. Speaking of secrets, affairs are less of a scandal and more of a scheduling nightmare. Lovers come and go, sometimes announced, sometimes smuggled in after midnight through a network of servants who all know exactly what's happening and who will happily spill the details for the right price. You've memorized the creaks in the floorboards so you can tell the difference between an approaching paramour and a maid on her nightly round. Maintaining romance at Versailles is a logistical feat. The competition is fierce. Everyone is attempting to seduce everyone else, if not for love, then for leverage. Gifts are exchanged with coded messages, glances are traded across salons, and clandestine meetings are arranged with the kind of subtlety that would make a spy blush. Of course, discretion is an illusion. The walls are thin, the servants are curious, and if you try to whisper, you'll only be heard by the one person you wish wouldn't. And then there's the laundry. No matter how glamorous your affairs, you still have to contend with the ever-expanding heap of clothing in the corner. Changing outfits multiple times a day is great for making fashion statements, but less great for anyone tasked with scrubbing grass stains out of satin. Your personal maid glares at the laundry basket as though she's negotiating a hostage situation. Rumor has it that more than one love letter has been accidentally boiled, and at least one lacy undergarment has made the rounds of court, attached to a scandalous poem. Personal hygiene here is a delicate negotiation. You'd like to appear as fresh as the flowers on your dressing table, but the reality is more complicated. Between midnight rendezvous, spilled wine, and perfume clouds dense enough to trigger local weather alerts, most evenings end with a quick wipe down and a prayer. No wonder the sheets smell like a cross between heartbreak and last week's cheese platter. Sleep, when it comes, is both a relief and a risk. You drift off surrounded by tokens of affection, half-drafted apology notes, and the faint dread that someone's about to knock on your door with another request for a private conversation. Pillows are for clutching, tossing, and, in emergencies, screaming into. In the cold morning light, you survey the battlefield of your boudoir. Love lost and found, secrets barely concealed, and laundry that started its own quiet rebellion. You smooth your hair, dab on a little extra powder, and prepare to face another day of emotional acrobatics, strategic napping, and the unending struggle to keep your romantic and laundry affairs from becoming tomorrow's headline, because in the French aristocracy, privacy is a myth. Love is never simple, and laundry, like gossip, just keeps piling up. Lunch begins at noon and ends when someone passes out or leaves in tears. The table groans under courses of suspiciously grey meat and mystery sauces. Wine flows, insults fly, and indigestion is a way of life. To the uninitiated, lunch at Versailles sounds like a dream. Gold-rimmed plates, candlelit chandeliers, footmen gliding around with trays piled high. But from your seat, wedged between the marquis who won't stop recounting his military failures and a duchess with a vendetta against cutlery, it feels more like running a social gauntlet with a side of food poisoning. The first thing you notice is the noise. Everyone is talking, nobody is listening, and at least one person is arguing with the bread. The courses arrive in a parade of questionable ambition. Cold pigeon, braised eel, a pie that may or may not be moving, all arranged with enough garnishes to disguise their true age. If you're lucky, you recognize at least half of what's on your plate. If you're unlucky, you make the mistake of asking what la surprise du chef actually is, and suddenly your appetite is gone. Wine is the only guarantee. Decanters pass from hand to hand. Glasses are refilled before they're even empty. And by the second course, everyone's cheeks are as rosy as their powdered wigs. Water is considered suspicious at best. Too many parasites, not enough fermentation. So even the children are sipping diluted claret. It keeps spirits high and inhibitions low, which is both a blessing and a curse. As you nibble, you try to pace yourself, knowing there are at least 8 more courses to go. Each plate brings a new adventure. Overcooked mutton, fish drowning in a sea of capers, vegetables boiled until they resemble confessions. If you hesitate too long, a servant whisks away your plate and replaces it with something even more mysterious, forcing you to take strategic bites while maintaining polite conversation. Polite, of course, is relative. The real action isn't on the plate, it's across the table. Gossip crackles like static. An offhand remark about a duchess's hat spirals into a full-blown argument about fashion, then pivots to a scandal involving a broken carriage, a priest, and 3 jars of gooseberry jam. At some point, someone forgets themselves and brings up politics. This is the cue for the oldest baron present to dramatically clutch his chest and remind everyone of the good old days, which, as far as anyone can tell, involved fewer sauces and more duels. If things get really heated, cutlery becomes a weapon. You've never seen someone point a fork with such veiled menace until you've watched a countess defend the honor of her soufflé. Sometimes the tension breaks with laughter. Other times, with someone storming off to write a furious letter or collapsing onto a fainting couch, strategically positioned for just such an emergency. And then there's the endless toasts. Everyone stands, glasses in hand, offering tributes to the king, to love, to whatever noble cause is trending this week. By the 3rd or 4th toast, your legs are numb, and you're quietly grateful for the tablecloth that hides your shoes, which, by now, are sticky with spilled gravy and the tears of lesser nobles. The dessert course is both a finish line and a fresh trial. Candied fruit, marzipan sculptures, and cakes, so dense they could be used as cannonballs. You eat, not because you're hungry, but because it gives you an excuse not to speak. When the final plates are cleared and the servants sweep up the crumbs, you rise from the table, light-headed, overfed, and emotionally drained. Surviving lunch in the world of French aristocracy isn't about good food or good company. It's about endurance, strategic eating, and the ability to smile through indigestion. Congratulations! You've made it to the end, still standing, mostly sober, and only mildly insulted. Now, if you're lucky, you have just enough time for a nap before the next social ordeal begins. Nothing gets done without a small army of servants, each with a specific job, a complicated grudge, and the keys to all your embarrassing secrets. Be nice to them, your life and your breakfast depends on it. Let's be honest, you may be the marquis, but it's the people below stairs who run the show. The chateau is an intricate, well-oiled machine powered by human ambition, petty rivalries, and the ceaseless clatter of feet on marble. On paper, you're in charge. In reality, you're just another expensive accessory for the staff to manage. Every waking hour of your life is orchestrated by a team of specialists. There's the valet, whose job is to dress you, undress you, and pretend not to notice when you can't find your own shoes. The chambermaid, who knows exactly how many times you've skipped a bath and can recite, from memory, the location of every hidden love letter under your mattress. The cook, a culinary genius who could start or end your day with equal ease, depending on whether you remembered her birthday. Even your lapdog has its own dedicated servant, tasked with the solemn duty of chasing it out from under the sofa and returning it to your lap with minimal barking and only occasional biting. Then there's the butler, the master of ceremonies for all things edible, potable, and gossiped about. His memory is legendary. He never forgets a grudge, an unpaid debt, or the fact that you once tried to serve white wine with roast beef. The butler holds the true power. Nothing is delivered to your table or your bedroom or your unsuspecting house guest without his say. So, the footmen are the show ponies of the household. Dressed in livery so crisp it could slice cheese, they glide through the halls with silver trays, delivering letters, cakes, and the occasional brutal verdict on your taste in upholstery. They're everywhere, eavesdropping, exchanging meaningful glances, and developing inside jokes about your inability to keep a wig on straight. Occasionally, you'll catch them playing shuttlecock in the back corridor, using your best lace handkerchief as a net. Laundry maids toil away in the steamy underworld of the chateau, wrestling with mountains of linen, the occasional love note stuck in a sock, and stains that defy both science and prayer. The gardener, rarely glimpsed above stairs, maintains the illusion of order in the gardens, cursing the peacocks and quietly judging your taste in statues. There are pages, grooms, stable boys, candle snuffers, and water carriers. Each one is essential, each one is invisible until something goes wrong. The real secret to surviving aristocratic life isn't social status, it's staff management. These people see everything. Who snuck into whose bedroom, who fainted in the rose garden after 3 glasses of sherry, who accidentally spilled sauce on the Duchess's gown. They're the original social network, trading information faster than the post can deliver it. Make one angry, and you'll find yourself wearing yesterday's underclothes by mistake. Make all of them angry, and suddenly you're the main character in the week's juiciest rumor. Bribery is an expected part of the household economy. You slip a coin to the kitchen maid for extra dessert. Promise the stable boy your old boots if he keeps quiet about the late-night visitor. And always, always, tip the butler at Christmas if you don't want your secrets airing by 12th night. But it's not all drama and backstairs politics. Sometimes a servant saves your skin, smuggling a love letter, slipping a second helping of tarts onto your plate, or warning you about the undercooked pheasant before it's too late. They might even cover for your latest scandal for a price. So, Next time you sail through your day thinking you're the master of the house, remember, it's the small army behind you that makes sure your world doesn't collapse in a flurry of lost wigs, burned toast, and public humiliation. The chateau runs on gossip, grudges, and gratitude. Treat your staff well, or start practicing how to eat burnt toast with a smile. Lapdogs, parrots, and the occasional monkey roam freely, spreading joy, chaos, and diseases yet to be named by science. Aristocratic pets have better healthcare than most villagers, but absolutely no manners. It's the sound of tiny paws on marble that signals morning has truly begun. As you attempt to sip your tepid chocolate and recover from the latest chamber pot incident, your favorite lapdog, let's call him Monsieur Bubbles, leaps elegantly onto your lap, trailing a wake of perfumed fur and questionable fluids. No breakfast is complete without your loyal companion snuffling at your crumbs, gazing into your eyes with the shameless entitlement only a dog with its own velvet pillow can muster. Pets, for the French aristocracy, are more than just status symbols. They're living accessories, and the more exotic, the better. One duke collects parrots, each with a vocabulary that would shock a sailor. The countess across the hall keeps a monkey that's notorious for both pickpocketing and relieving itself in houseplants. Someone once tried to keep a miniature pig indoors, but it made a scandalous escape and was last seen leading a conga line of geese through the orangerie. You quickly learn that, in the world of Versailles, animals are the ultimate icebreaker or deal breaker. They're conversation starters. Isn't he clever, madame? He can say 3 entire words in Italian, courtly gifts, and more than once, weapons in ongoing feuds. There are stories of a noble woman's lapdog strategically deployed to soil a rival's best gown. Duels have been fought over stolen canaries. Pet-related drama at court is more cutthroat than most inheritance disputes. Healthcare for pets is nothing short of miraculous compared to what's on offer for the average peasant. If Monsieur Bubbles so much as sneezes, a personal physician is summoned, armed with lavender-scented bandages, chicken broth, and the best leeches money can buy. Your lapdog gets more attention for a minor itch than you did for that time you fainted in the rose garden. There are even rumors of pets with their own miniature beds, custom-made bonnets, and, on more than one occasion, embroidered nightshirts. But hygiene? A completely different story. Despite being doused in rosewater, powdered, and combed until they resemble sentient dust bunnies, aristocratic pets are walking flea festivals. The court is a living experiment in cross-species parasite transmission. It's not unusual to discover a tick leaping from your monkey onto the cheese tray, or a flea bravely exploring the front lines of your best silk stocking. Petting a dog is a risk. Cuddling a parrot is an act of pure hubris. Their manners are as questionable as their health. Dogs bark at ambassadors, chase cats through the king's study, and steal hors d'oeuvres from the hands of the bishop. Parrots interrupt political discussions with an ill-timed "Vive la Révolution," and everyone pretends it's charming, not ominous. Monkeys will snatch wigs, overturn inkwells, and, on at least one occasion, attempt to mount a diplomatic envoy. No one dares discipline them. After all, these pets are family. Training is mostly for show. Yes, your dog can jump through a hoop or fetch a ribbon when he feels like it, but tell him no and you'll get a look of such haughty indifference you'll wonder if he's been taking etiquette lessons from the Queen. It's an unspoken rule. The more spoiled the animal, the higher its owner's standing. If your parrot hasn't started at least one diplomatic incident, are you even trying? Still, they bring a certain chaotic joy. Laughter echoes down the corridors as puppies tumble over priceless carpets and cats perch regally atop harpsichords. Even their disasters provide stories for the salon. They're a welcome distraction from the stress of scandals, scheming, and the ever-present fear of eating bad cheese. So, as you smooth your gown and shoo your monkey away from your wig, remember, in the grand hierarchy of Versailles, it's sometimes the creatures with the smallest collars and the biggest fleas who rule the roost. Body odor is an accepted fact of life. The most you can hope for is to be the least offensive person in the room. You try to hide the sweat stains under lace and bravado. Welcome to the pungent reality of aristocratic France, where the nose is both your best ally and your mortal enemy. In a society where perfume is a necessity and fresh air is considered suspicious, every room you enter is a game of olfactory roulette. The golden rule: don't be the smelliest person at the table. The silver rule: if you are, make sure your status is high enough that no one can mention it. Let's begin with the basics: clothing. Your silks, brocades, and velvets are beautiful to look at, but murderous to wear in the summer heat. There's no such thing as breathable fabric. The only ventilation comes from the odd hole you've worn in your sleeve after years of nervous fidgeting. You perspire beneath layer after layer, the sweat soaking through chemises, petticoats, breeches, and doublets until you're convinced you could personally solve the chateau's water shortage just by wringing out your undershirt. Bathing, as previously established, is more social theory than daily practice. A full immersion wash might happen once a month, twice, if you're feeling daring or have a very important ball to attend. In between, you resort to the bassin d'eau de toilette, a fancy bowl of slightly cloudy water used for dabbing your face, hands, and whatever other parts you can reach without risking a wardrobe malfunction. For the hard-to-reach areas, a quick spritz of rosewater or orange blossom will have to do. It doesn't remove the smell. It simply adds a floral top note to the existing eau de humanity. Of course, the problem isn't just you, it's everyone. The Grand Salon, by noon, is an aromatic stew of nervous sweat, garlic breath, mildew from last year's tapestries, and the ever-present undertones of dog. You become an expert in creative breathing, shallow inhales, mouth closed, and the subtle use of a lace handkerchief scented with violet oil. Sometimes, in moments of desperation, you accidentally spill a few drops of cologne on the floor just to take the edge off. If you're lucky, you have access to the latest advances in hygiene. Vinegar rinses, herbal sachets sewn into your clothes, or even a dusting of chalk to soak up excess moisture. If you're unlucky, your best option is to stand near the kitchen and hope the smell of roasting meat overpowers everything else. Armpits are a battleground. Deodorant is not yet a thing, so you rely on natural remedies, sage, rosemary, and the timeless classic, avoidance. You cross your arms in public, keep your elbows glued to your sides, and pray the sweat stains don't bloom into full-on floral arrangements before dinner. Underarm pads exist for the truly fashionable, though they often slip at the worst possible moment, tumbling out of your sleeve and onto the parquet in front of 30 delighted guests. Hats and wigs don't help. In fact, they trap heat and moisture, transforming your scalp into a petri dish of possibilities. The combined effect of sweat, powder, and old pomade means your head carries a signature scent, a mix of sheep, soap, and silent despair. And through it all, you maintain composure. You smile, curtsy, and pretend not to notice when people discreetly edge away. Because at Versailles, reputation is everything, and sometimes that means keeping your stink and your secrets equally well hidden. At the end of the day, you peel off your finery, examine the Rorschach test of stains beneath your arms, and promise yourself that tomorrow you'll find a new way to stay one fragrant step ahead. But deep down, you know, in the world of French royalty, hygiene is a moving target, and everyone is running a very sweaty race. The kitchen is a war zone. Cooks battle mice, spoilage, and basic math. Most dishes are seasoned with, "What's that smell?" and an existential sense of dread, while the nobles above stairs are busy debating politics and the moral failings of their rivals. Deep in the heart of the chateau, chaos reigns. The kitchen is less Julia Child, more Game of Thrones with aprons. Here, the cook is both general and judge, ruling over a sweating army of assistants, knife-wielding boys, and a saucier who hasn't slept since last Tuesday. The first thing you notice in the kitchen, if you dare to visit, is the heat. Roaring wood fires burn all day, filling the air with a haze so thick you could poach an egg just by holding it up. Pots the size of bathtubs boil, spit, and occasionally explode. The scent? A potent blend of overripe vegetables, burnt sugar, and something vaguely rodentish. The air is alive with the frantic flapping of chickens, the hissing of cats, and the curses of a pastry chef locked in mortal combat with a collapsed custard. Food storage is an adventure. Refrigeration hasn't arrived yet, so everything perishable is preserved with salt, buried in fat, or just left on the cold stone floor and prayed over. The cheese is aged mostly by neglect, while fish is kept fresh by shooing away the flies and serving it before anyone can protest. It's a race against the clock. Will the chicken be cooked before it cooks itself? Will that hunk of beef last until lunch? Or is it already halfway to the afterlife? And then there are the mice. Oh, the mice. They're everywhere, scurrying along rafters, popping out from behind sacks of flour, occasionally staging full-on raids for a piece of last week's tart. The staff pretend not to notice, or else they'll be forced to explain why half the bread rolls have bite marks and why the cat has gained suspiciously little weight this year. Every so often, a footman is dispatched to hunt down the boldest offenders, armed with a broom and the world's flimsiest sense of dignity. Sanitation is more of a guideline than a law. Surfaces are wiped down with whatever's handy, a damp rag, a handful of parsley, or, in desperate times, a sleeve. Everyone's hands are perpetually sticky with something, and you learn quickly never to ask what. Wooden spoons are passed down through generations, accumulating both wisdom and a fine patina of bacteria. If a utensil smells a bit off, you just wave it over the fire and declare it purified by flame. Recipes are flexible, both out of necessity and a complete disregard for measurement. A pinch of salt might be a fistful, and bake until golden could mean anything from slightly toasted to call the fire brigade. Most dishes get a taste test by the youngest kitchen boy. If he survives, it's deemed safe for the nobles. Spice is used with abandon, sometimes to mask questionable freshness, other times just to impress the visiting Spanish ambassador. If disaster strikes, and it will, it's spun as innovation. A burnt tart, caramelized to perfection, soured cream, a delightful aged tang, dropped roast, tenderized by the chef's own hand. The art of kitchen PR is as vital as any recipe. By the time your lunch arrives upstairs, it's a minor miracle of logistics and luck. The plate is artfully arranged to hide the worst flaws, and any odd flavor is attributed to the chef's unique vision. You eat, savoring each bite, never realizing the battlefield that lies just below your feet. So, next time you complain about your mystery stew, remember, in the secret world of the kitchen, survival is the true signature dish. And bacteria is always on the menu. After a heavy lunch, you attempt a nap, hoping the combination of red wine and 40 pounds of fabric will lull you to sleep. The noise from the courtyard, duels, dogs, and the cook screaming at a chicken makes it a challenge. Let's be honest. Nothing says privilege like calling it a day at 2 in the afternoon and diving headfirst into an official nap. You sprawl across your bed, already a battlefield of ruffled linens, discarded love notes, and yesterday's undergarments, and try to arrange yourself in the least crumpled, least overheated position possible. This is no easy feat. Your afternoon attire involves at least 3 layers more than strictly necessary, each one determined to twist itself into a new and more uncomfortable configuration the second you close your eyes. You attempt to settle in. The silk sheets are cool, but only on the surface. Underneath, your own body heat turns the mattress into a kind of aristocratic crockpot. You peel off a glove, kick off a shoe, and begin the age-old French ritual of dramatic sighing. If you're a true expert, you can achieve a nap-ready state in under 20 minutes, provided you're not interrupted by a stray footman looking for lost laundry or a maid needing to refresh the linens, code for gossip and a peek at your correspondence. The palace is never quiet. Outside your window, the afternoon is in full swing. Somewhere in the distance, a pair of bored cousins have decided to duel over a disputed handkerchief again. Their swords clink, punctuated by the occasional shout and a round of applause from the garden staff. Someone's terrier is yapping enthusiastically, chasing a flock of peacocks that scatter like feathered confetti. The kitchen, meanwhile, erupts with the kind of racket you'd expect from a battlefield. Pots banging, a cook cursing in at least 3 languages, and a chicken clucking its last in a dramatic, operatic crescendo. If, by some miracle, you do manage to drift off, your dreams are a wild montage of courtly anxieties, wig malfunctions, spilled wine on white brocade, being asked to recite Latin in public, or that recurring nightmare where you show up to a ball only to realize you're still wearing your nightshirt. Even asleep, your mind can't quite let go of the daily hazards of high society. Servants tiptoe around, whispering and closing doors with exaggerated care. Still, every noble's worst fear is being caught mid-nap by a surprise visitor. You've trained yourself to jolt awake at the faintest knock, ready to sit up, fluff your hair, and pretend you are just deep in thought about Rousseau or the price of tea. Nap etiquette is its own art form. The best nappers have a reputation for napping, a kind of social armor. Do not disturb, the marquis is at rest. There's a delicate hierarchy. Only the truly powerful can nap without criticism. The rest must fake productivity or risk being accused of laziness, which, in a world where doing nothing is considered an occupation, is really saying something. Occasionally, you find solace in your secret nap spots. A window seat hidden behind curtains, a quiet corner of the library, or the ever-reliable chaise lounge in the second drawing room, the one nobody else uses because it smells faintly of camembert and crushed violets. These are your havens, and you guard them jealously. You wake, if you slept at all, feeling slightly more rumpled than before, your face pressed with the pattern of your embroidery, your hair flattened on one side, and your wig perched at a daring angle. You splash a little water on your face, dab on a fresh layer of powder, and declare yourself refreshed, even if your only real achievement was not snoring in front of the staff. Afternoon siesta, aristocratic style, part luxury, part survival tactic, and all about maintaining the illusion of leisure, even when the real sport is just staying awake through the rest of the day. Entertainment means cards, dice, and enough cheating to make the Olympics blush. If you're not gambling away the family fortune, you're probably inventing a new fire hazard with your friends. Let's set the scene. The chandeliers are sparkling, the wine is flowing, and every flat surface has been transformed into a makeshift gaming table. As afternoon lazily rolls into evening, the drawing rooms of the chateau come alive with shouts of triumph, dramatic groans of despair, and the ever-present clatter of coins exchanging hands. Gambling isn't just a pastime, it's practically an Olympic event. The only thing more competitive than a round of faro or piquet is the battle to hide your disappointment when you lose your inheritance in under 30 minutes. The games start innocently enough. Cards are shuffled, dice are rolled, and you join the table with a smile that says, "I totally trust everyone here." That trust lasts about as long as it takes for someone to announce, "Let's play for stakes." Within moments, strategies are abandoned in favor of subtle signals, meaningful coughs, and the occasional strategically placed mirror. Everyone's got a trick, marked cards, loaded dice, or, in one memorable instance, a lapdog trained to bark when the deck is stacked. Cheating is so common it's almost expected. The unspoken rule is that as long as you don't get caught, you're just playing with flair. If you do get caught, the reactions vary. Some players burst into theatrical tears, others laugh it off, and a few challenge their accuser to a duel at dawn. Once, an unlucky baron had to forfeit his prized carriage after being caught with extra aces up his sleeve. The carriage is still parked outside. a cautionary tale with wheels. For those less inclined to risk their property on cards, there are parlor games, most of which involve drinking, dares, or minor acts of arson. Someone inevitably proposes candlestick bowling, a sport invented solely to see who can knock over the most priceless candelabras without igniting the curtains. If things get dull, the local pyromaniac, usually a bored cousin, suggests a round of fire poker. The rules are simple. Poke the logs until something sparks, then see who can shout for the servants first. Games of chance quickly morph into games of endurance. It's not unusual for a session to last until dawn, fueled by a steady stream of claret, gossip, and pastries purloined from the kitchens. Tempers run hot, friendships are tested, alliances are formed and broken with every throw of the dice. The night air, heavy with perfume and ambition, crackles with tension, plus the occasional spark from someone's scorched sleeve. Not everyone is a willing participant. There's always one guest sitting awkwardly in the corner, pretending to read Rousseau while actually plotting an escape. Others hover around the snack table, nervously eyeing the ongoing carnage and calculating whether their jewelry will be next up as collateral. Everyone has a limit. The trick is never letting anyone know what it is. When the games finally end, the room is a battlefield. Coins are scattered, feathers are singed, and at least one piece of furniture is missing a leg. You've survived, either richer, poorer, or just glad you didn't have to explain any scorch marks to the butler. The servants arrive with brooms and knowing smirks, sweeping away the evidence of another night's mischief. Still, the memory lingers. Laughter echoing down the halls, the thrill of forbidden risks, and the knowledge that tomorrow, the stakes will be just as high, and the games just as dangerous. After all, what is the point of being aristocracy if you can't gamble recklessly, cheat shamelessly, and occasionally set something on fire, all in the name of a good time? Baths are rare and dramatic. When they happen, it's an event, water hauled by the bucket, heated over hours, and shared by half the household. You come out slightly cleaner, but haunted by the experience. For most French aristocrats, the concept of a quick bath is as foreign as self-service laundry. Bathing is a production, a special occasion right up there with royal birthdays and the annual sighting of a clean chamber pot. It begins with a collective groan from the servants, who know the next several hours will involve endless trips up narrow staircases with sloshing buckets of steaming water. By the time enough water has been hauled and heated, the kitchen is empty, the hallways are soaked, and 3 footmen have resigned. The tub itself is a work of art, a copper or porcelain basin big enough for one. Though often occupied by a rotating cast of family members, pets, and, depending on the hour, the neighbor's visiting cousin. You wait your turn, praying you're not last. The earlier you bathe, the less infused the water is with the memories and floating hairs of everyone who went before. Undressing is its own ordeal. Your wardrobe involves laces, stays, layers upon layers of silk, and at least 2 people with enough engineering skills to get you in and out without tearing anything except your dignity. The moment you finally step into the tub is both triumphant and terrifying, a little too hot, a lot too cloudy, and just deep enough to submerge your regrets. Someone throws in a handful of herbs, lavender, rosemary, or whatever was growing closest to the stables to freshen the water and disguise the suspicious floating objects. Bathing is not a private affair. A parade of maids comes through, offering soap made from lard and ashes, slightly gritty, scrubbing brushes, and questionable advice on skincare. If you're a person of true status, a hired bath attendant will wash your back while politely ignoring your attempts at small talk and your visible discomfort. Gossip floats as easily as the petals on the surface. Who's in love, who's in trouble, and who's rumored to have skipped their bath entirely last quarter. Soap is more for show than sanitation. You rub it on, watching it slide off into murky oblivion, and call it a day. Rinsing requires more buckets of lukewarm by now. Water dumped unceremoniously over your head. The entire process is punctuated by squeals, gasps, and the occasional shriek when a frog, or worse, leaps from the depths of the tub. There is always a frog. No one knows why. Emerging from the bath, you're handed a rough linen towel. Drying off is half massage, half exorcism. You're desperately trying to remove whatever is clinging to you, physically or emotionally. A quick inspection in the mirror reveals you're only marginally cleaner than before, but now you smell faintly of wet grass and defeat. Now comes the drying ritual. Powder everywhere, a light mist of rosewater, and a fresh change of clothes, assuming you didn't sweat through them in the process. You stand by the window, hoping the breeze will do what centuries of hygiene have failed to accomplish. Later, you'll tell everyone at dinner how refreshing your bath was, artfully dodging the truth about the family of spiders you discovered in the tub drain. The servants whisper about how much water was wasted, and someone in the kitchen will make a joke about how the vegetables are cleaner than the marquee this month. And so, you make a mental note to bathe again soon, which, in aristocratic terms, means maybe before the next full moon. After all, cleanliness is relative. Drama is inevitable. And the less said about what's still lurking at the bottom of the tub, the better. Welcome to bathing, 18th century style. An ordeal, a spectacle, and a story you'll be telling and trying to forget until next month's adventure. Dinner is where the real decadence and danger begin. Exotic meats, forbidden mushrooms, and gallons of claret are served under crystal chandeliers. Food poisoning is just part of the thrill. As dusk settles and the candles are lit, the chateau transforms into a theater of appetite and anxiety. The table stretches on forever, gleaming with silver platters, golden goblets, and so many forks that you need a roadmap or a discreet nudge from your neighbor. Just to navigate your place setting, the air is thick with perfume, wood smoke, and anticipation. It's a show of abundance, at least, for the lucky few at the high table. The first course arrives in a parade of footmen. Tiny birds in elaborate pastry shells, stewed quails, and platters of game, hunted at great expense, and, if you're honest, questionable legality. You fork a slice of venison, eyeing it for movement, and politely ignore the fact that some dishes are rumored to contain endangered species or gifts from neighboring estates. Culinary diplomacy at its most hazardous. Bread is abundant, but variety is scarce. There's the hard, brown loaf that could double as a weapon, and the white, fluffy rolls strictly reserved for the nobility. Each course is an adventure, featuring ingredients you've never seen and spices that cost more than your valet's yearly wage. The salt is kept locked in a little chest, the key dangling from the butler's neck like the Holy Grail. But with each decadent platter comes risk. The line between delicacy and disaster is razor thin. Those wild mushrooms might be a delicious treat, or they might send you hallucinating into next week. The oysters arrive, glistening and raw, as a test of both bravery and gastrointestinal fortitude. If you decline, you're a coward. If you indulge, you might not make it to dessert. At least if you fall ill, the apothecary is already on call, and you won't be the first to slip away mid-feast. Wine flows freely. Claret, Burgundy, champagne, the glasses are never empty, and neither are the conversations. Toasts are made to the king, to love, to the chef, who may or may not be hiding in the pantry, sweating bullets. With every refill, tongues loosen and secrets spill. By the time the main roast arrives, the table is a cacophony of laughter, scandal, and the occasional discreet belch muffled behind a napkin. Between courses, entertainment abounds. Minstrels serenade you with questionable harmonies. A nervous poet recites verses that sail straight over the heads of half the audience. And the court jester tiptoes through the crowd, risking life and limb for a half-hearted chuckle. At some point, a heated debate erupts over whether last night's duck was succulent or simply still moving. Not everyone at the table eats equally. The further you are from the head, the slimmer your pickings. While the Duke spears the last piece of pheasant, you make do with whatever's left, a congealed spoonful of aspic, a wilted vegetable, or the lingering hope that dessert will be less terrifying. The lowest servants wait in the shadows, eyeing the platters for leftovers, ready to swoop in at the faintest nod from the butler. Dessert is the grand finale. Towers of candied fruit, marzipan sculptures, shaped like mythological creatures, cakes so dense you need a knife and possibly a small hammer. Sweet wine is passed, the children grow giddy, and you begin to pray that the after-dinner entertainment doesn't involve audience participation. As the candles gutter and the plates are cleared, you lean back, both victorious and a little afraid. Your stomach is full, your nerves are shot, and you're keenly aware that, in this world, every feast is a flirtation with famine. The aristocrats' dinner table, where luxury and danger meet and survival is always just a bite away. Bon appétit. May your appetite be bold and your stomach stronger still. The night ends with a private concert, an amateur play, or watching a cousin attempt poetry. Your ears beg for mercy, but etiquette demands applause. Evening falls, and the castle transforms into a stage, every hallway echoing with anticipation and the faint sound of someone tuning an out-of-tune violin. You change into your best evening attire, another hour spent wrestling with laces and buttons, and glide down to the grand salon, where you're greeted by a sea of powdered faces, forced smiles, and the unmistakable scent of anxiety. Tonight's entertainment has been planned for weeks, which means the stress is palpable, and nobody is actually enjoying themselves. The footmen pass around cups of weak punch and trays of candied nuts, while you eye the nearest exit in case things get truly dire. Conversation hushes as the hostess sweeps into the room, proudly announcing that her gifted nephew will now read from his latest poem. The audience exhales as one. You brace yourself. The lights dim, the performance begins. The cousin, age 12 but with the confidence of a failed playwright twice his age, recites an epic about lost love, geese, and possibly cheese. You're not sure because his rhymes are questionable and his delivery is mostly shouting. Still, etiquette is king. So you clap politely, pretending you weren't silently wishing for a surprise outbreak of laryngitis. After the poetry comes the music. Sometimes it's a professional quartet hired from Paris. If you're lucky, they know how to play together. More often, it's a collection of nobles who own instruments for decoration and now feel obligated to prove they can produce noise. A lady attempts a sonata on the harpsichord. The result is somewhere between tragic and heroic effort. The violinist's bow snaps, and the flautist gets the giggles. You keep smiling, nodding, and hoping nobody asks you to join in. Next up, the theatre. No evening at Versailles is complete without a play, usually written by someone in the family. The set is lavish, the costumes even more so. But the script? Let's just say Molière won't lose any sleep. The plot is incomprehensible, the acting melodramatic, and the actors themselves more interested in flirting backstage than following stage directions. Still, you watch, you clap, and you compliment the performance with a straight face. That's the art of survival. But the worst is yet to come. Audience participation. Suddenly, you're volunteered to read a line, join a dance, or, worst of all, improvise a song. You pray for divine intervention, or at least a conveniently timed fire drill. But etiquette is unforgiving, and refusing is a social faux pas that could haunt your reputation all season. In between acts, the gossip flows. You murmur about who flubbed their solo, who wore the wrong shoes, and whether the hostess's poodle actually bit the tenor, or if it was just playful enthusiasm. Some guests disappear into shadowy corners to conduct their own private performances, while others sneak out to the garden, grateful for the peace and the crickets. For all its awkwardness, evening entertainment serves a purpose. It's a test of manners, patience, and your ability to keep a straight face. It offers new material for tomorrow's scandals: who blushed at whose joke, who missed their cue, who fell asleep mid-aria and had to be poked awake by a sympathetic footman. As the final note dies away and the last applause echoes through the gilded halls, you rise, exhausted, ears ringing and cheeks aching from all that polite smiling. You survived. You did not yawn, at least not obviously. You did not flee far. And you gave the required applause. And that, in the end, is the true art of the aristocratic evening. Enduring the tortures of taste with dignity and just a hint of wax in your ears. Bedtime means prayers, potions, and pretending your sheets don't smell like everything you ate this week. You ponder mortality, the price of soap, and whether the footman is still waiting outside your door. The grand finale of your aristocratic day begins not with rest, but with ritual. Preparing for bed is a drawn-out affair, less about relaxation and more about warding off whatever calamities the night might hold. First come the prayers. You kneel on a cushion so old and lumpy you suspect it was once used in a jousting tournament, and mutter your way through a litany of saints. You pray for your health, for your soul, for your creditors to lose your address, and, most fervently, that the rats in the walls have found somewhere else to party tonight. Once you've negotiated terms with the divine, it's time for science, 18th century style. The bedside table is a pharmacy. Little glass bottles filled with dubious liquids, velvet sachets of dried herbs, and a mysterious jar labeled elixir of quiet sleep. You sniff it. It smells like licorice and mild regret. Tonight, you decide, you'll risk just a single sip. A footman stands at attention in the corner, ready to leap forward with a cup of warm milk, a candlestick, or, if needed, a bucket. Now for the nightly inspection. You approach the bed as you would a sleeping bear. You gingerly lift the covers, half expecting something to scurry out. The sheets, supposedly linen, possibly burlap, are a patchwork of stains and stories. Some older than you are. Despite the best efforts of the laundry maids, each sheet has its own, shall we say, aroma. There's a faint whiff of yesterday's roast, last week's cheese, and an indefinable note of just hang it by the window and hope for the best. You sigh, fluff the pillows, and promise yourself, again, that you'll request fresh sheets tomorrow. Of course, you're not alone. The footman hovers, awaiting instructions. You dismiss him with a curt nod, only to realize you still need someone to wind the clock, poke the fire, and, if you're superstitious, sprinkle a protective circle of lavender around the bed. Once, you caught a maid reciting a spell to ward off nightmares. Now you ask her to do it every night, just in case. Disrobing is a process unto itself. Buttons are unfastened, ribbons untied, and layer upon layer of fabric is peeled away like an onion with delusions of grandeur. A final dusting of powder, a dab of scented oil behind each ear, and you're ready to slip into your nightshirt. A garment designed for modesty, warmth, and the easy transmission of dreams involving angry geese. You climb into bed and immediately regret it. The mattress sags like a diplomatic compromise, and there's always a mysterious lump just where your hip wants to go. You pull the covers tight and try to ignore the slight itchiness crawling up your leg. Was that a feather? A crumb? Something with legs? You'll deal with it in the morning. Before extinguishing the candle, you survey your bedside table one last time. A relic of your childhood, a small silver bell for emergencies, and the latest scandalous letter you swear you'll burn tomorrow, but probably won't. You blow out the candle, lie back, and let the darkness settle in. As you drift off, you ponder the existential questions of French aristocratic bedtime. Will the potions work? Will the sheets hold together for one more night? Will anyone discover that you hid the leftover cheese under the mattress last week? The answers, as always, will have to wait until morning, because at Versailles, even bedtime is a performance. Equal parts faith, superstition, and stoic resignation. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be more restful than your sheets. As you drift off, visions of angry mobs and misplaced heads haunt your sleep. Maybe tomorrow you'll try bathing, or maybe not. Either way, you tuck your lace collar a little tighter, just in case. Nighttime in the chateau is supposed to bring a kind of peace. But lately, sleep has become just another battleground. You lie back on your not quite clean sheets, surrounded by the gentle crackle of the fire and the far-off echoes of distant revelry. A masquerade somewhere deeper in the palace, or perhaps just another midnight argument in the servants' wing. The air feels heavy, thick with candle smoke and anxiety. Outside your window, a breeze rattles the shutters, carrying with it the faintest, almost imagined, sound of angry voices from the city. You try to focus on pleasant dreams, silk gowns and garden parties, towers of cream-filled pastries, a world where your only problem is remembering which wig to wear tomorrow. But the revolution has started to creep in. It's there at the edge of every thought, like a shadow in the corner of your candlelit room. You toss and turn, wrestling with your bedding and your conscience. The truth is, the world beyond Versailles is changing. You've heard the rumors at dinner, bread riots, pamphlets passed hand to hand, people in Paris who aren't content to simply be hungry and quiet anymore. You pretend it's all nonsense, just the talk of servants trying to stir up trouble. But even your dreams betray you now. You see yourself running through echoing hallways, chased by a mob carrying torches and, worse, questions. Questions about taxes, about justice, about why the cheese has gotten smaller and the bread harder. Your sleep is interrupted by fits and starts. One moment, you're presiding over a lavish ball, crowned with peacock feathers. The next, you're looking out over a balcony at a sea of faces. They're shouting something you can't quite understand, but you're fairly certain it's not a compliment about your taste in wallpaper. Your heart pounds. Your lace collar feels tighter. You reach up, half asleep, to loosen it, then reconsider. What if the mob comes tonight? You want to look your best. Somewhere down the corridor, another aristocrat is wide awake, clutching a silver crucifix, whispering prayers for peace and for the continued obscurity of their financial records. You're not alone in your fear, but the walls here are thick, built to keep out not just noise, but reality. Still, even stone can't muffle the sense that change is on the wind. The candle guttering on your bedside table throws monstrous shadows on the walls. Shapes that twist and leap, almost like guillotines. Or is that just your imagination? You remember a time when the only nightmares you had involved showing up to a masquerade without the right mask, or being caught in public with last season's shoes. Now, your dreams are crowded with unfamiliar faces, slogans, and the persistent feeling that all this silk and satin is just a very fancy disguise for something much more fragile. Tomorrow, you tell yourself, you'll do better. You'll say something kind to a servant. You'll try to eat less at dinner, maybe even consider bathing. Or you'll just stay in bed, pull the covers over your head, and hope it all passes by like a summer storm. But even as you plan, you know the tide is turning, and no amount of lace or perfume can cover the scent of fear. As sleep finally claims you, your mind drifts into a feverish world where kings and queens are toppled by bakers and blacksmiths, where a revolution is always just outside the window, and where survival might mean learning to sleep with one eye open. Rest well, dear aristocrat. Tomorrow's another day, and you'll need all your wits about you. And maybe, just maybe, a fresh pair of silk pajamas. You wake up with a headache. Is it the wine, the wig powder, or the existential terror of being alive in 1788? No matter. The family doctor prescribes his favorite cure, bleeding. Out comes a rusty lancet, a few hungry leeches, and a prayer to Saint Germain. Healthcare, in this era, is a faith-based initiative with a high risk of spontaneous fainting. Let's set the stage for the average day of aristocratic illness. You don't just call a doctor. You summon him, often from his breakfast, sometimes from the local tavern. He arrives in a swirl of cloak and self-importance, carrying a bag full of tools that looks suspiciously like gardening equipment. There is no modern medicine, only the four humours, which means every ailment can be blamed on an excess or deficiency of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, or black bile. Your headache? Clearly, your blood is unruly. Your rash? Too much bile. Your unshakable anxiety? Blame the moon. Or possibly the wallpaper. Bleeding is the all-purpose remedy. The family doctor insists that a little less blood will do you a world of good. You grit your teeth as he ties a rag around your arm and unsheathes his lancet, which hasn't been sterilized since the reign of Louis XIV. There's no anesthetic, but he assures you it's just a scratch. He draws a little vial, examines the color, and proclaims with the confidence of a man who's never doubted a guess, yes, that's the troublesome humor right there. You're left dizzy, pale, and convinced that you're only a few treatments away from becoming a marble statue. If bleeding seems too old-fashioned, it's time for leeches, nature's little vampires. The doctor places them with great ceremony, usually on the most inconvenient spot possible, your temples, your ankles, or directly in your wig line. You're expected to lie perfectly still while the leeches do their work, which means thinking about your choices in life and whether you really needed that second helping of aspic at dinner. Leeches are said to cure everything from gout to heartbreak, though the only thing they reliably treat is optimism. Next comes the prescription phase. The apothecary sends over a selection of potions in little glass bottles, each with a label that might as well read, "Good luck." There's syrup of poppy for pain, read, "Mild confusion and uncontrollable napping," mercury for fevers, enjoy the hallucinations, and the ever-popular unicorn horn powder, which is actually just ground-up deer antler and wishful thinking. If your stomach doesn't settle, you can always try a poultice of herbs, bread, and mud, applied directly to the forehead for that freshly frosted look. Of course, no treatment is complete without a generous side of religious intervention. The family chaplain stops by to offer prayers, light a candle, and drop a few cryptic hints about sin and spiritual imbalance. You're reminded that your suffering might be divine punishment for eating meat on a Friday or failing to tip your valet at Christmas. Spiritual guilt, the original side effect. For more persistent problems, you're sent to the country for rest, which means locking yourself in a drafty chateau and waiting to either recover or become a local ghost story. If things turn dire, the barber surgeon is called. The same man who trims your wig will cheerfully pull teeth, lance boils, and, should all else fail, apply enough leeches to form a living hat. Recovery is a miracle, but so is survival. You emerge from treatment weaker, paler, and with a newfound respect for modern aspirin. The next time you feel a tickle in your throat, you debate whether it's worth the cure. In the world of French aristocracy, medicine is an adventure, a blend of hope, horror, and whatever happens to be crawling in the apothecary's jars. Congratulations! You survived another day, another doctor's visit, and possibly even your own treatment. Now, time to celebrate, carefully. After all, you wouldn't want to overexert your humours. Every self-respecting noble has a private chapel, mostly to speedrun forgiveness for everything they did at last night's dinner. You kneel in velvet, confessing only the fun sins. The priest is paid well to absolve, but everyone knows he's really there for the cheese and gossip. Stepping into your private chapel is like stepping into another world. A world where the candlelight is softer, the air is faintly spiced with incense, and the secrets are tucked neatly away behind gilded altars. The room is a miniature cathedral, complete with stained glass, hand-carved pews, and a personal confessional box that gets more traffic than your front door. You sink into the plush kneeler, glance up at the painted cherubs, and try not to make eye contact with the skeleton saint in the corner, who looks a little too judgmental for your liking. Confession, in this era, is less about spiritual catharsis and more about social maintenance. Everyone knows you've got to keep up appearances. The trick is to confess just enough to appear humble, but not so much that anyone suspects you've been up to anything actually interesting. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," you murmur, carefully omitting the details about last night's drinking contest, the accidental and entirely avoidable fire in the drawing room, and the unauthorized use of the bishop's mitre as a soup bowl. The priest, for his part, is no fool. He's heard it all, mostly from the servants, who see everything and forget nothing. He nods sagely, offers absolution for your excessive enthusiasm at dinner, and quietly jots down the more amusing details for later retelling over wine and brie with his colleagues. It's an open secret that your confessor is just as much a player in the game as you are. He knows where the bodies are buried, sometimes literally, who's having an affair with whom, and which noble has been secretly sneaking off to the stables for a little illicit goat racing. Of course, not all sins are created equal. Some nobles take confession as a chance to perform, a sort of holy improv, where the goal is to sound as pious and as harmless as possible. You'll hear admissions like, "I coveted my neighbor's lace," or "I accidentally drank too much communion wine." The juicier details, blackmail, bribery, petty larceny, are saved for more private audiences or for moments when the priest can be persuaded to forget in exchange for a particularly fine wheel of cheese. After your confession, it's time for penance, which, conveniently, rarely interferes with your busy schedule. A few prayers, maybe a donation to the orphanage, or a pledge to refrain from gossip for a day, which everyone knows is impossible. The important thing is the performance. Kneeling in velvet, clutching a gilded rosary, and sighing theatrically for the benefit of any passing servant. The chapel is also the go-to venue for all sorts of spiritual quick fixes. Need to calm your nerves before a duel? Light a candle and pray for steady aim. Worried that your soufflé will fall during the king's next visit? Offer a donation for culinary intervention. Concerned about the suspicious stains on your ledger? Slip a few extra coins into the collection box and hope divine accounting is more lenient than the royal tax office. Yet for all its ritual and routine, the private chapel is, paradoxically, a place of genuine comfort. You leave feeling lighter, whether from forgiveness or just from having a quiet moment away from the relentless demands of court life. The burdens of sin are, at least for now, replaced by the sweet promise of cheese and a cleanish slate. You emerge, newly absolved and slightly peckish, ready to face the next round of temptations with a clear conscience and just a hint of selective amnesia. After all, sin may be inevitable, but forgiveness, especially when paired with brie, is one of the few true luxuries of aristocratic life. Status isn't just shown, it's inhaled. You send letters soaked in ambergris to friends and rivals alike, making the mailroom smell like a chemical spill. Even your poodle has its own perfume, leaving a trail of expensive funk wherever it goes. If you're not choking on fragrance, you're not doing it right. Power, in the world of the French aristocracy, is a matter of appearance. But more than that, it's a matter of aroma. Perfume is everywhere, floating through the halls in clouds so thick you could carve your initials in them. Your standing in society is measured not just by the cut of your coat, but by the strength of your signature scent. If your presence doesn't trigger a coughing fit at 20 paces, are you even trying? Let's start with correspondence. Writing letters is already a competitive sport, but the olfactory arms race takes it to the next level. You spend hours selecting just the right scent for the occasion, a dash of rose for a love note, a swirl of lavender to ease a diplomatic feud, or a powerful blast of ambergris, to subtly remind your enemies that whales have died for your social standing. Sealing wax is perfumed, paper is soaked, and when the courier collects your daily stack, he does so at arm's length, lest he pass out before reaching the next estate. Receiving a letter from you is as much an assault as an honor. The recipient opens the envelope and is immediately hit by a bouquet that lingers for days, outlasting most scandals. Some particularly competitive nobles have been known to slip a sprig of dried herbs or a sachet of violet powder into their missives, just to ensure their words are read with watery eyes and an unmistakable reminder of who's in charge. But it's not just the letters. No, every living thing in your orbit is weaponized with fragrance. Your poodle, Madame Bijou, sports a custom scent, something between orange blossom and mysterious marsh. She parades through salons, trailed by a wake of perfume so potent that guests discreetly angle for fresh air. If she so much as sneezes on a guest's shoe, it's months before the smell fades. The lapdog's personal grooming kit includes scented powders, rosewater rinses, and a tiny silver comb dipped in musk, just in case her natural odor ever dares to emerge. Even the furniture is in on the game. Cushions are spritzed daily, drapes are soaked weekly, and entire rooms are aired with herbal smoke to drown out the underlying musk of damp stone, old cheese, and human ambition. Visitors often leave your apartments with your scent clinging to their clothing. A calling card far more memorable than any handshake. Of course, there's an art to layering. Too much rose and you risk smelling like a lovesick baker. Too much civet, and you're exiled to the garden until the air clears. The most accomplished noses can detect 12 different notes in a single whiff, from spicy clove to that subtle hint of old library you had blended, especially for the winter social season. And what of the downsides? Occasionally, your social circle becomes a battleground of competing aromas. Dinner parties descend into chaos as clashing perfumes battle for supremacy, leaving the less robust guests gasping for air and the servants praying for a strong breeze. The only way to win is to go bigger, bolder, and, if necessary, more expensive. Your annual budget for fragrance could feed a village for a year, but priorities are priorities. Still, you drift through it all serenely, confident that your legacy won't be your wit, your wealth, or your questionable moral decisions, but your unforgettable, unstoppable scent. As you pen your next letter and dab a touch more ambergris on the dog, you smile. In this world, power isn't just a look. It's a smell that announces you've arrived, lingers after you leave, and occasionally clears a room faster than politics ever could. Your walls are covered in the finest portraits, most of them featuring relatives you never liked, in poses they never managed in real life. Unfortunately, centuries of bad ventilation mean every painting is accompanied by a thriving colony of mysterious spores. You can practically hear your immune system groaning in protest. Art is the soul of the aristocratic home, or at least, that's what you tell yourself every time you pass another oil painting of your great-uncle staring moodily at a bowl of fruit. Collecting art isn't just about taste. It's about family pride, social status, and having something to point at when the conversation dries up during yet another interminable dinner. Yes, that's the Baroness. No, she never actually rode a horse. We just thought it looked heroic. Each portrait is more elaborate than the last. There are brooding ancestors in elaborate periwigs, toddlers swaddled in enough lace to curtain the palace, and at least one cousin who insisted on being painted with their favorite goose. You've got battle scenes, hunting parties, and a very suspicious allegorical painting involving a cherub, a pineapple, and what may or may not be a statement about the family's sugar investments. The grander the frame, the bigger the ego. But the real star of the gallery isn't the subject, it's the texture. Generations of open fires, candle soot, and damp stone walls have given each masterpiece a certain lived-in look. You run your fingers along a canvas and find a layer of dust, followed by a layer of what might be mold, followed by a vague sense of regret. Somewhere under all that, a pair of painted eyes follows you around the room, silently judging your choices, particularly your decision to skip last month's bath. Ventilation, as it turns out, is not a strong suit of palatial architecture. Windows are tightly shuttered to keep out the commoners and the cold, but unfortunately, this just keeps in the musty, mushroom-scented air. Some rooms are so thick with spores and mildew that you can practically feel the portraits multiplying behind your back. The staff does what they can, waving fans, burning bundles of herbs, occasionally scraping the walls with a bread knife. But the fungi always win. It's less an art collection, more a petri dish in a gilded frame. And it's not just the paintings, tapestries, statuary, and rare objets d'art all join the parade of allergens. A tour through your drawing room is a tour through history and through several generations of microbial evolution. If you're lucky, you escape with nothing more than a sneeze. If you're unlucky, you develop a mysterious rash that becomes the talk of the next salon. Still, there's no denying the power of a well-placed portrait. Guests are impressed by the sheer number of ancestors staring sternly down at them, especially after a few glasses of claret. You can always find a painting to fit the mood, the stern patriarch for intimidating rivals, the simpering maiden for romantic conversation, or the pouting child for deflecting questions about your own ability to produce an heir. It's social chess, played with oil and canvas. Of course, owning great art isn't just about appearances. Sometimes it's a health hazard. Once, a mysterious green haze started growing behind Aunt Isabel's portrait. The local physician diagnosed it as painter's melancholy. A cure was never found. But the frame now sports a charming collection of herbal sachets, changed weekly in vain. But for all the respiratory risks, you wouldn't trade your gallery for anything. The portraits bear witness to the absurdity, ambition, and outright oddness of your bloodline. They remind you that aristocratic life is equal parts pageantry and farce. A comedy of generations immortalized in linseed oil and mildew. So you cough politely, offer your guests a scented handkerchief, and stroll through your ancestral hall. If nothing else, it's proof that in the aristocratic world, status isn't just inherited, it's airborne. So here you are, back in your own bed, a survivor of powdered wigs, questionable cheese, and more personal scents than a perfume shop fire. You've navigated a day in the world of the French aristocracy, a place where the rich were rarely clean, the food was occasionally deadly, and the only thing thicker than the perfume was the denial. You've endured lacy collars that cut off your circulation, meals that doubled as health risks, and medical care that involved more bloodletting than a vampire convention. You learned the hard way that being an aristocrat didn't mean being comfortable. It just meant your chamber pot was fancier and your gossip more expensive. And yet, even with all their filth and folly, these people managed to build palaces, throw parties, and survive the chaos of their own ridiculous routines, at least, until the day the revolution knocked at the door. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into clean sheets, take a quiet moment to appreciate everything you have: hot water, toothpaste, private bathrooms, and the comforting knowledge that nobody is going to sneak into your room and dump a chamber pot out the window. Maybe send up a silent thank you to all the unlucky souls who paved the way for modern plumbing and who taught us that sometimes too much perfume is just too much. Because history, in all its mess and madness, is proof that people will always find a way to adapt, to laugh, and to keep going, no matter how many layers of velvet and lice they're hiding underneath. The next time life feels unfair, remember, you could be wearing a powdered wig and sleeping with a poodle that smells like musk. Rest easy. You made it through another historical horror show. May your dreams be peaceful, your bed bug-free, and your morning breath less tragic than a French duke's. Good night.